Good evening and a very warm welcome to First Issues. Exactly 1 week after reviewing BURSE services on the program, today we are at the Public Procurement and Asset Disposal Board offices in Gaborone to report back on yet another technological advancement by a government body. Should all these happenings get us used to hearing talk and even expecting talks of innovations in our country? Or do they represent a coming of age of Botswana as the country nears 50 years of independence? We certainly hope so. Later on in the program, we help you in your bid to master your finances, lest of course they master you, teaching you the difference between good and bad debt. But we begin by sharing what we learned at the launch of a platform last week Monday at the Pakalane Golf Estate Hotel. Although the Public Procurement and Asset Disposal Board, that is PPADB, has even grander ambitions for this system, stakeholders gathered at the launch of the electronic services site last week were in agreement that what has already been done signifies a drastic change in the tendering process. Welcome back to First Issues as we continue our look into what is most likely a first in the world of procurement worldwide. Pioneered by our very own Public Procurement and Asset Disposal Board, PPADB, it is the Integrated Procurement Management System, IPMS. We were told that 3 tenders have already been successfully awarded using this system and that there have been no complaints thus far. Most of us are familiar with submitting information or even forms online. But how is a tender evaluated and awarded electronically? The executive chairperson of PPADB, Bridget John, unpacks the functionalities that separate the IPMS from other systems like it.
We have sought to develop a system that will take care of the entire procurement process, right from the stage that we have an officer sitting at the ministry or department creating an invitation to tender, that tender document that we normally call ITT. And I must stress, it is created at the ministry. Once it's created, it comes through to PPADB for what we call vetting, where we ensure that it is aligned to the requirements of the Act, it is not biased, it is transparent in that the evaluation criteria is disclosed, just to make sure that we adhere to the principles of public procurement. That's the vetting that we do. The system also allows that we then issue this tender online. And when we issue this tender online, depending on the requirements, say who we expect to respond to this tender, because the requirement is that it has to be somebody registered with PPADB. That tender document will outline the codes or sub-codes that we call for from bidders. Now, we'll be sending email alerts and SMSs to those people in our database who are registered so that they know there is this tender out there, and at their own time they can download it, check if they are interested, and if interested, they can then pay and start preparing their bid. They will submit their bid online as well. There's something we call a key pair management system for security reasons, which allow them to encrypt and decrypt their bid submissions so that their documents remain intact. We have to take care of integrity issues there. So because they are even able to submit, we are also opening these bids online. And those people who would have submitted, they'll be able to see who's competing with them. After opening, the same person who prepared that tender document, they'll be able to take, and the evaluation team constituted to evaluate that bid, still online. And it comes to PPADB or to our tender committees for adjudication, depending on the threshold. Adjudication and award will be done online. We also have this module on dispute resolution, because sometimes some things don't go right in tenders, and even the legislation recognizes that and there is room for redress. So we have sort of automated the whole scope.
What motivated this? Who said this is possible? Because I can't say you benchmarked on any existing system.
We know that with the use of paper, it's so burdensome. Sometimes we even lose track of records. What was the last submission about? We have to be running around looking for records. And it's not only time consuming, it's also very inefficient. You know the stories of missing files. So manual operations are very problematic. So we have set ourselves a very noble vision, becoming a center of excellence in public procurement and asset disposal by 2018. So this for us is a grand step towards that. You'd also be aware that as part of this IPMS, we have the asset disposal module. We also have the capacity building module, because we have a responsibility also to bring up the skills of stakeholders in procurement. So we thought about this, and we are like, you know, our mandate as PPADB is very huge. So we have to find smart ways of executing it.
Don't you worry that this now may be creating an unlevel playing field for those who are not as tech savvy as others? One of your representatives at the launch spoke about how one of your clients couldn't fully appreciate the importance of the @ symbol in an email address. Don't you worry about computer literacy and how this will affect tendering for government projects?
I think where we are, everybody should recognize that there is no turning back. Technology is here with us. Use of technology is the best step towards improving this productivity, this efficiency. Then people will take the trouble to make sure that they have what it takes. These cell phones, when they started, who would have thought that everybody would have this device? Even those who are illiterate, they still use these cell phones. So it's a mindset thing. If you think there is value in it, you'll do everything possible not to be left behind. So we are aware that there will be small traders, people are not the same. We'll be putting in place different initiatives just to bring everybody to embrace the initiative. What we are clear about is IPMS will not be a barrier to procurement.
Thank you for staying with us as we now turn our attention to another issue of interest, that being debt management. Our guest, Regina Sikaleselevaka, has been on our program before discussing the importance of savings and investment in securing your financial future. But with consumers becoming more and more indebted, we thought it prudent to equip our viewers with the skills necessary to avoid what can be a debilitating debt trap. And it's not just Botswana who like to spend borrowed money. Apparently by the end of this year, Americans will owe over $1 trillion in outstanding credit card debt for the first time ever. Part of mounting evidence that consumers are reverting to pre-downturn bad habits. The most indebted consumers, however, are Australians, with around $2 trillion in unconsolidated household debt relative to $1.6 trillion in GDP. And I recently read a news article that says most South African consumers owe more than 75% of their monthly salary to financial institutions. Over-indebtedness does not only bear implications for an individual and their family, but for the wider economy. But our guest tonight says we cannot fully avoid debt because our savings cannot help us achieve everything we aspire to. She does, however, stress that we must learn to differentiate between good and bad debt for borrowing to be healthy. How do we determine the difference between good and bad debt? Returning guest Regina Sikaleselevaga tells us how.
Okay, I think I need to answer that question by starting off very broadly and talking about how we should be living our lives to start with. Because what we find is that a lot of people have a lifestyle in mind, and then they go out and they set out to live that lifestyle, regardless of what their income is. So sometimes you find that there's a mismatch between the lifestyle and the income that the person is earning. So what I would say is we take a step back and you look firstly at your income and you look at the amount of money that you have, and then decide what sort of a lifestyle can be afforded by that income that you have. And if you do it that way, then you'll find that it's very unlikely that you're going to run into major financial crisis. But going back to the issue of savings, I think I've said in the past that when you've looked at your income, then you need to work out different ratios to say that this amount of my income will go towards fixed expenses, this amount will go towards savings, and this amount will go towards whatever. And then every month you are looking to see whether you are achieving that ratio. Once you've taken away the savings, once you've taken away the tax, the fixed income, then you've got what we call disposable income. And your disposable income is what you should base your lifestyle on, because that is what you can play with. Now, you make a very good point that if you're going to save for everything, you won't be able to do much. So debt is inevitable. You've got to have debt at some point in your life. The good thing is, the key thing is that you need to differentiate between what is good debt and what is bad debt. My own guideline is that you incur debt for things that will always be there, for things that you need, and for things that are tangible and are always going to be there. So, for example, you can incur debt to buy a house. You can incur debt to buy a car because you need transportation to and for work like that. But you shouldn't be taking debt on perishable items. Don't take debt to go on holiday. Don't take debt to have a celebration, because you're going to have that celebration. It's a one-off thing. A celebration is happening on the 20th of December, that's it. And then you're left with this debt for 2-3 years to pay back. And then you are left with a very bitter taste in your mouth that you are now paying for something that you can't see. So my own guideline is that look for something that you can identify as being necessary in your life, but also of having longevity. It's something that's going to be there for a length of time in your life, facilitating the type of life that you need.
And not only won't you just be paying this back, you'll be paying it back with interest.
You'll be paying
something
it back,
that's already gone.
Yes, you'll be paying it back with lots of interest, because the other thing that we should all remember is that when you've got savings, the interest that you make or the return that you make on savings is always lower than the interest that you get charged on debt. So chances are that if you've got money somewhere and you need to take a decision whether you are going to get debt, if you've got money that you can use that money instead of getting debt, if it is debt that you can pay for. So for instance, if you want to furnish your house and you've got 10,000 in the bank, it's wiser for you to use the 10,000 that you have to finance the furniture that you want. Because if you go and get debt, you're going to get debt, and it's going to charge you a higher interest than what you are getting on the savings you have in your account. So I think when we send out the message that savings and debt, we should understand that it's very dynamic. The process is dynamic. You shouldn't get fixated in the mode that I'm going to have savings and I won't touch debt. It is a nice and very sophisticated interplay. You just have to learn how to do it. So when you get debt, make sure that it is for something that you absolutely need, something that you can't do without, and something that's going to be there for a long time in your life.
I think the older I'm getting, I'm starting to realize that some people just don't have it in them to say, I can't afford this. They feel their wants determine them getting something. prioritizing becomes quite difficult for many people. And as you've said, some debt is good. But in our past conversations, you've said people sometimes get mortgages that are beyond their availability to pay. Although it's a good investment, it may not be the right one for them. Do you have guidelines with regards to the ratios that you alluded to before? How much maybe of your income should be going to your mortgage? How much should be going to savings? Or is it not that cut and dry?
It's not that cut and dry because it really depends on a person's lifestyle and it depends on what a person's priorities are. Like for instance, if I just give you an example, if you just recently married and you've got no children, so you allocate your income very, very differently from somebody who's entered retirement and they've raised all their children, they've educated all their children, and they've paid off all their bonds. So I wouldn't like to go into those ratios because I can end up, misleading the audience. But what it is that everything or your life, you must live your life consciously. You make a good point that some people think they absolutely need this. They're not thinking. It's an impulse. They just do it because that is what society does. That is what the expectation is. That is what is sitting in the subconscious. If they lived more conscious lives, then at every point they would be stopping and questioning, do I really need this? Do I want this? If I don't do it, what's going to happen? But we don't do that. It's very, very subconscious. It's very, very unconscious, and it's sitting in the subconscious, being dictated by the way that society is. So I think what I want to share is that we need to adopt a more conscious lifestyle, a more conscious way of living our life that takes into consideration what's happening around us. I think I've made the point before that when you look at our economy or when you look at the global economy, it's not doing as well as it used to. When you go into a home, you find that the children in that home that have graduated from university that are still looking for jobs, which is something that which didn't happen in the past. So as our environment changes, as the economy is changing, we know that minerals are not doing as well globally. We know that diamonds are not doing as well globally. All these factors one has to be conscious of and say, if this is where I am, where am I going to be in the next 5 years? Where is Botswana going to be in the next 5 years? And how do I prepare myself to be there with it? So it should be something that one does. Life must be something that we do with our eyes wide open to what's happening around us.
Okay, moving on from now that we know the difference between good and bad debt, how now do we manage our debt going forward? What are the must-dos?
We have enough evidence to know that household debt in Botswana is very high. So I think I can comfortably say that a lot of people are in debt already. And they are in debt, like I said, they've gravitated into this debt, not really thinking about it, not because they were being careless, but because you're just moving along and you're not planning. I think it calls for a reflection. One needs to sit down and say, I am in debt. How much of this debt is avoidable and how much of it is not avoidable? And then go through a process where you get rid of the things that you don't need. I always have to go back to the issue of need and want. We need to be very conscious about what is it that you need, what is it that you absolutely cannot do without, and what is it that you want. Something that you want is something that you can do without, but it's nice to have. So you go back to the basics and you look at why you are in debt. What are you funding with that debt? Are you in debt because you've got credit at the clothing store, at the furniture store? You bought your TV off debt? Look at all those things and say, but do I really need these? And if I don't need them, you need to be able to get rid of the things that you don't need. If you've got 2 cars, one for your wife and one for the husband, and you've got 2 others parked in the garage, ask yourself, what are those 2 others parked in the garage for? Do I really need to have them? Why don't I get rid of 2 so that I've got 2 left, and then I can manage my debt better. So the key thing about managing debt is get out of it. We underestimate what a garage sale can do for you. You just open up your garage, you sell the heaters and the kettles and the TVs that are sitting in the garage, and you just get rid of that junk. You'll be amazed at the amount of money that you can make from doing that. And then you look at your cars and you get rid of the cars and you get rid of all those things that you don't need that are cluttering you. Clean off your debt. And then if you still have outstanding debt, you then say, how do I pay back this debt in a manageable way? One thing that you shouldn't do when you are in debt is you shouldn't miss your monthly installments, because then you accumulate a lot of interest on those installments that you are missing. The second thing that you shouldn't do is you shouldn't run away from your creditors. Don't run away from the people that have given you the money. So you go and change your SIM card, you no longer answer your phone calls, and you go into hiding. All you are doing is you are driving this person to desperation so that they can come after you with a vengeance. You rather go to the person who's loaned you money, or if it's a financial institution, and you make a plan, because these financial institutions also want their money back. They don't want you ducking and diving and running away with their money. So go to the bank, talk to them, and come up with a new payment plan, which will be easier looking at your overall picture. And I keep going back to the point that you need to look at your overall picture and say, how much income do I have in my hands, and how can I use it? And if you find that what you're paying for exceeds what you have in your hand, go and reduce the things that you're paying for so that you're paying for less.
To conclude our program, we now read the winning response to last week's show. Kopo Jessica Enga from Maung wrote that tonight's episode bore nothing but great news for many of us out here. The BURS e-services platform sounds like a truly convenient and money-saving transformation that will indeed help Botswana to comply with tax regulations. The short demonstration of using the platform actually erased my suspicions that perhaps the platform was a bit complicated to use. I, for one, cannot wait to try it out. The future is seriously looking bright for Botswana and BURS. Please make sure to include your name and your location when using our SMS line to contact us. We wish you all, including this week's winner of some First Issues goodies, a good night and pleasant viewing.